I am a man of science, a doctor in the fair town of Ralston. I hold my practice in my estate just outside the city. I've cured many men of their ailments and children of their colds, helped many a new mother with the pains of childbirth and care. My wife, may God rest her soul, was my assistant, my pride and my joy. She was the shining light through the darkest of nights, and the sun on the brightest of days. That is, until she developed a sickness that developed almost overnight as she slept. When she would get the slightest of injury, the blood would not stop. She took to coughing and was bedridden for days. I did all I could to save her. I gave her every medication just to make the bleeding stop and the coughing pause, but it was of no use. She became paler than the soft moonlight, and she looked me in the eyes and told me she loved me before she adopted a permanent, glassy stare. What cruel irony was brought upon me that a doctor as myself cannot save his own wife, especially a doctor with such prestige as I, with my stores of coffers and state-of-the-art equipment. Even with all this useless clutter, I could do nothing to stop the blood. That night, while I lied in bed, I made myself a vow that I would not let another in need who passed through my doors die. A few weeks later, a child and her mother came through my doors. The child looked pale and weak. I put her in one of the beds and instructed the mother to stay by the child. Upon examination, I found the child's femur was snapped in two and her leg swollen with infection. I knew I had to immediately operate. I found the bone in shatters, but did not know what to do. Until I saw lying on the table the body of a young man, about the child's height. This one had died from a fall that broke the skull, and he was on my list to cremate. Using quick thinking, I removed the broken bone from the child and replaced it with that of the young man. Upon closure and cleaning out the infection, the child seemed to improve. This sparked an idea. If this deceased young man could save a child, couldn't others do the same? As I was thinking of ways to improve this, a woman came in, complaining of pain and excessive bleeding. I brought her to a bed to rest and instructed her to stay the night. I knew what must be done, and with that I headed out into the night. I concealed myself with my finest cloak and hood, and made myself a target for the rapscallions who wished to gain a quick piece of gold. I wished myself not to come to harm, so I found a plate of steel to place upon my back and front. However, this was heavy and forced me to have a hunch. This befitted me to look weak, and I even took an old cane to add to the illusion. I set out that night. Not long in turning down alleyways and corridors, someone started following me, my first target. I turned down the alleyway, making sure I looked extra frail. The youth came over and broke the silence. "Your money or your life, old man? Or maybe I will just take both." I masked my voice with my weakest impression. "You will never get my wallet." And with that he stabbed me correctly in the back of my metal plate. He recoiled in shock when I jumped on him, grabbing the knife and stabbing him below the second rib. And with that, I had my material. I quickly hid the body and rushed back to my estate. I ordered my servants to rope my horses on my wagon, and I rode out to collect. The body was collected, and I used some tubing to pump the blood from the body to the girl, and she began to be better. This was a miracle, and with that I kept the body for use, for blood and bone. And when I was finished with it, I cremated it in the night, as to avoid suspicion. Each week I would dress as an old, rich man, but slowly it would become harder to find the lawbreakers to save lives. That is when I set my eyes upon the prison. It was easy to get clearance to enter the jailhouse, but I needed access to the prisoners. These men were the worst of the worst. I went into the prison under strict business to find a suitable prisoner who had the strongest physique to harvest. I asked the prison guard, a close friend of mine, access to the prisoners to examine them, to be sure they were in good health, with my secondary goal in mind. He granted me access to a fellow by the name of Tom. He had been incarcerated for stealing from an esteemed gentleman and was caught. When I stepped into the room, I looked him up and down. The fellow was lean and thin. Skin tone was healthy, and he looked to be well fed. I talked with him. He had the mentality of a criminal who knew jail was only a room and a time sentence. He knew he would be out soon and would be back on the streets with the rest of the wretched scum. He would be my first savior. The next day I came back under the guise of wanting a second opinion, but this time I brought with me my secret. The circulatory system is a delicate, intricate structure. One could fathom that the absence of blood, it could no longer function, as many endure some sort of blockage. However, the fact that a blockage doesn't have to be solid is little known. That if a pocket of air were inserted into this vulnerable system, it would cause catastrophe, which is near impossible for even a skilled medical doctor like myself to detect. Alone with Tom once again, I decided to extend a friendly gesture of a hug. Whilst my hands were behind his back, I made my strike just below the base of the neck to surely hit a suitable vein. With the syringe properly emptied, the man jumped back and demanded to know what I did to him as I concealed my guilt. "What happened, my poor man?" I said, with a start, imitating empathy as best I could. He told his neck hurt, as if it had been pinched. I implored to look at it, and saw a slight drop of blood on it. I brushed it away and told him it was nothing, and that should this pain persist, he should have the jailer call me. Later that night, I heard a knock on my door. It was the prison guard, with a body in tow. He told me that the man collapsed and was unresponsive. I took him in and announced the time of death, and there I performed my technique of drawing blood and guts from the man. Stitching him up, I noticed his face, upon which sat bruises, black and tarnishing of his once handsome mug. The guards must have attempted this to snap him out of his fatal heart failure. Some weeks passed before another sickly lady came in. Her mother told me she was weak and not of appetite. The woman lied there, looking malnourished and frail. Again, I returned to the prison to find there was a woman in jail. Young and beautiful, save for the bruising on her neck. Her crime was shooting her husband over a dispute and killing the man. She told me of his love for him and her sob story, how she didn't mean it to, but the argument just got so heated she squeezed the trigger from which she could not undo. She was from the next town over, which is why I was not brought to her husband to revive, but she was taken here to be in isolation, away from the scum men. She was healthy, fit, and beautiful, and perfect for my purposes. However, back at the estate, the girl was weakening, her heartbeat faint and arrhythmic. Something needed to be done. Upon further examination, it seemed that she to be in perfect health, save for her heart. Decided the most risky thing I've ever attempted in my career. I needed to replace it, a procedure that doctors only dream about. Up to this time, I would think it could not be done. But now I know better, as I am a miracle worker. I set my sights upon the criminal woman, knowing that she had what I needed, a beating, healthy heart. Upon return to the prison, I concealed my syringe filled with anesthetic to knock the woman out, upon which I would fake a medical emergency and take her back to my abode. This proved to be harder than I thought, for when I injected her, she screamed a piercing scream and flailed violently. I grabbed her, tried to steady her, but she struggled. Finally, the guard opened the door, and the woman collapsed in my arms. I told the man she was having an episode of psychosis, and she needed to have medical attention immediately. The guard was dim-witted enough to buy my excuse, and made haste to my estate. Once alone, I wheeled my patient to the surgery room, with the woman on the adjacent bed. This would be risky, but it had to work. I quickly opened both of them and carefully plucked the heart from the woman from the prison. I then used my fast and careful needlework to sew it into the patient. All the while it continued to beat. It was a success. As I was cleaning out the criminal, however, I noticed something. She had been with child. Most likely the offspring of her and her late husband, now a family again beyond the grave. I looked at my hands, covered in this woman's blood. Could she have been telling the truth? Could she have been mistaken to kill her husband? My blood stopped cold. Could I have ended a family for my own sake? Dismayed, I went to wash my hands, but the blood wouldn't come off. No matter how hard I scrubbed, it stayed stuck tight to my hands. I rushed to get as much soap and antiseptic as I could, desperate to be clean. I needed to get someone, anyone, but my servants were all asleep, and I needed to be clean. I placed gloves upon my hands, and for a while it was concealed, but soon the blood started pouring out of them, tainting the fabric red. I rushed out of my home, trying to avoid sight. I ducked into alleyways and ran. I made a turn and found myself at a dead end. I shook and turned to run, but I was blocked by a shadow. A deep voice stated,
"So, you must be the one who are killing all of my men."
I trembled, hunched over, clawing at my hands to get the blood off, whilst attempting to listen to his words. Suddenly, there was a gunshot, and I fell. The shadowy figure slowly walked up to me. Its face changed into that of my wife. She looked as lovely as ever. I was saved. I was going to heaven. I would be reunited with her. I looked upon her beautiful face and gazed into her eyes as I put my blood-soaked arms outstretched to embrace her, that I almost did not notice the tiny, bloodied horns growing out of her head.